pong.
Accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the blind blogger Maxwell Ivy, and this is another episode of the Accessibility Advantage, where I'm advocating for more accessibility for people with disabilities by emphasizing the many positive benefits of embracing inclusion. And you can find me at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. You can send me an email to maxwell at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. Uh, I'm more than happy to share my almost 2 decades of experience in the field of digital accessibility to help you improve your products, services, or content so you can leverage the power of the disability community. So I do hope you're well. Check out my website. So today, I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to this interview. I had a great conversation with my guest a couple of weeks ago, and quite frankly, I'm still trying to digest some of the things I learned then that I'm going to hopefully learn more about today. Her name is Juliette, and she has always had the understanding that accessibility is important to learning and development. She has worked for many top corporations, which I'm sure she'll tell us about later. And I love how she has come to understand that improving accessibility in education of any kind leads to more loyalty, to more understanding, to better results. And she has created an AI based product called Zappo. You can find her at iridescent technology.ai. And I love the way she approaches accessibility. She says that she wants us to get to the point where instead of the learner having to adapt to the educational system, whether that be a school-based learning or work-based learning, instead of the user having to adapt to the system will adapt to the user and do so throughout their entire lives. So, Juliette, welcome to the Accessibility Advantage. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Max. Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm honored that you are coming on the podcast with your work in your company, as well as all your work as a leader, a thought leader in the field, plus being somebody who travels extensively. I'm just honored that I get to have you on my podcast. So, why don't you talk a little bit about your background and where in your life you first decided that accessibility was something that mattered to you and something that you believe should matter to everybody else?
Yeah, great place to start. So I have been in the education technology sector for getting on for 25 years now. I started my first venture, growth engineering, about 23 years ago. And that was at the beginning of, the SaaS revolution, people basically building SaaS tools for, corporate learning. And one of the things that we realized when we were building, that platform was there were many people that were completely sort of locked out of learning because the style of learning was one that basically didn't resonate with their curiosity. And so they were, just basically hitting the, continue button. And so at that point, we developed gamification as a way of engaging them. But more latterly, when AI arrived on the scene, I was very keen to do something bigger than just sort of focus on engagement levels. I wanted to do something in and around making education accessible to those that are currently locked out of education, like the long-term unemployed, like, those people who've been dropped out of school, those people who are seriously on the one end of the neurodiversity spectrum. And so my focus for the new company, Iridescent Technology, is to provide a hyper-personalized, individual way of learning so that no two people are delivered the same type of learning experience, because our brains are all different, and as such, we should receive instruction that maximizes our curiosity and reduces friction, basically.
Right. So before you go on, I want you to explain a couple of terms. I would normally say to explain them for my audience, but I actually need you to explain one of them for me. So tell people what sauce is, and then explain what you believe gamification means, because it's one of those terms I hear all the time, but I'm not really sure everybody is sure what it's all about.
Okay, great. So SaaS is software as a service. And for the purposes of your audience, you can imagine my customers being people like P&G, HP, Cisco, Apple. So these are, teams and, global employees, and the organization needs learning management systems in order to train them, right? So that is what growth engineering does. It basically provides the infrastructure for global companies to train their people. Now, that doesn't mean content necessarily. That's just a training system. So that's what our SaaS platform does. But the problem is with a lot of, they're called learning management systems, is that they don't make learning fun. Learning might be a moment in time. So it might be one piece of e-learning for compliance. And what you want if you are organizing a workforce is you want the continual development of that workforce. So by introducing gamification as core functionality, and this can be things like badges, XP, status awards, the way we create knowledge contests to reinforce learning. These all allow better engagement. So through using gamification techniques, and we use everything from sort of epic meaning through to storytelling, through to badges, leaderboards, levels, you can get a high level of engagement. And that's really what we're trying to do to ensure that you get that continuous learning culture.
That kind of sounds like some of the stuff that they did on Facebook to make it the Goliath that it is in the early days.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, gamification is used by a lot of different companies to drive engagement, particularly learning. So you would, if you've been onto Duolingo or anything like that, what they're interested in is you coming back on a daily basis to practice new skills. So for something like learning a language, which that's what Duolingo does, you really need to repeat to reinforce. So gamification is particularly good in that area for reducing the forgetting curve. I don't know if you're familiar with Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, which basically says that we forget everything that we have heard in, the first sort of 24 hours. So not everything, but 90% of what we've heard in the first 24 hours.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because I have a lot of those conversations with family members that I share my house with. That the thing we were talking about yesterday, everybody knew all the details, but to talk about it again today, some of those details are a little fuzzy. So
yeah, and that's really where reinforcement comes in. So to stop Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve properly kicking in, you need spaced repetition. And so this is one of the things that gamification can offer. So, you can make that fun. So you can do knowledge quests, you can do polls, reinforcing the original learning objectives. And that's what the platform does. So it embeds gamification into a corporate's ability to deliver learning in a kind of fun way.
Okay. Now I wanted to go back to one other thing you said before we get farther down the road here is you when I talk to people about accessibility and disability, we're usually talking about physical, mental, psychological, emotional disabilities and how they affect people's ability to participate in work, society, life in general. But you mentioned a couple of things that I wouldn't have thought about, but they do apply specifically to learning, and they probably apply more than we think about or give credit to, which has kind of opened my eyes a little bit here just this morning. That those people who uh, have been long term unemployed, or those people who did not really the learning system through the normal high school, college, secondary learning systems weren't reached, so they just got pushed along and pushed along. And then when they're out in the workforce, they are also at a disadvantage if they don't see themselves as having a disability. So these are places we're missing that have severe challenges to increasing their education, and if they can't re-educate themselves as they go through life, they're not going to find employment or other types of satisfaction.
And I think the last couple of words you said you just nailed it. Like, if you are kind of living your ideal life design, right? If you are living the life you think you should be living, you probably will have had to educate yourself and keep educating yourself in order to have that ideal job and that ideal life design. Learning and lifelong curiosity really is the key to having life satisfaction. And there's lots and lots of correlation with that. So the more curious you are about life, the more you learn about life, the more you have that sense of achievement, ultimately the happier you will be. And so what we're trying to do with Zavmo is particularly in and around people with neurodiversity. So people that are at, the end on the spectrum, should we say? I mean, it's called a spectrum because we're all on it, but the
Yes.
more not neurotypical, I should say. These are people that are often really smart. Yeah, they're really, really smart. They've got unbelievable skills. But at the end of the day, those skills are underutilized by the economy and by society, because they have dropped out of education, or they haven't had education delivered to them in a way that makes sense for their brains. And what we're saying with Zavmo AI is that has got to change. So the way humans are, we are so creative, we are unbelievably unique compared to AIs. And if we want a vibrant, exciting future, then we need to harness human potential, and the way to do that is harness all of human potential. And the way to do that is by offering, we believe, lifelong learning companions that basically map to your interests, your strengths, your way of learning, what makes you curious, what inspires you, in order to tap into what will allow you to achieve your ideal life design. And that is the goal of Zavmo AI.
Right. And you said something there that's really important. You said throughout the life, because one thing that has been becoming more apparent as I have these conversations is that at some point in our lives, every one of us will have what is considered a disability, whether we're born with it, whether it comes to us by trauma, or whether it comes to us by age. And so throughout our lives, we will go from lacking abilities based on certain skills to having lots of abilities to maybe not having the abilities that society expects us to or understands to, as we get later in life, having those abilities decline again. So approaching learning as if it's lifelong and ever changing and then tapping into AI sounds like the way we really should be doing this.
Yeah, I think your point also about the way we learn and how we learn is kind of vital. So when we go through the different stages in our life, so I'm just about to publish a book called Learning to be Human, which addresses this exact thing. So when you're young and you first, enter the school system, many people can have disadvantages that can come from anywhere. They can be economic disadvantages, they can be, disadvantages in terms of your social structure, they can be physical disadvantages, they can be neurological disadvantages, which means that your entrance to the education system will be hampered for the rest of your life. You will, it will cause issues because you don't have some of that foundational understanding. And that's what happens to a lot of people with ADHD, with dyslexia, with dyscalculia, those types of issues, which basically hamper their ability in a normalized school system. But then when you even get further than that, when you look at people entering their careers, are they able to move at the pace that their career needs to in order to maximize their curiosity about what they're doing? Is that career able to offer them the right opportunities that would inspire them to choose a career rather than kind of taking their foot off the pedal? And then if we go forward, potentially, in your 40s and 50s, you might be looking at a career change. You might have been in, the world of banking and suddenly decided you want to do something, different. And so how do you do a career change if you think that's going to, maximize your inspiration in terms of life? And then further out than that, we know that we're most likely going to be working into our 60s and our 70s. What help and support do we need to understand how our roles are going to change, what marketing is to the younger generation, and how we connect our value as we get older? But then even further, there are many, many people that are working very successfully, in their 90s. Okay. Well, the brain, works in a different way when we're 90. That doesn't mean to say that you don't have enormous skills and, multiple things to deliver to society and your network. And, if you're still working, work. But how does a tool like Zavmo AI help at that age? And that's really what the book is all about. Learning to be human is how we can utilize an AI learning companion in every phase of our life, and how invariably we will. And so what we need to know about utilizing an AI learning companion for life in order to maximize our curiosity and maximize our interest, in growing, developing, and learning, and living our ideal life.
There's a couple of things you keep going back to, and I just feel the need to bring them up. Is we're talking about AI, we're talking about learning, but you keep using the words curiosity and inspiration. And I find that interesting because one of my favorite quotes is famous author. She's known for the Eat, Pray, Love book and movie, but she's been writing her entire life as a freelance contributor. And she wrote a book called Big Magic, which she wrote for creators. And she said, and the one line that stuck with me from that book was that curiosity will carry you through when passion abandons you.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, what's really interesting is when you watch humans that are curious, a lot of people call it in the flow, and you literally lose, any sense of time, any sense of, I don't know, any sense of anything else, and you are absolutely totally in flow. You are in the moment. You are carried away with that moment of learning, and it feels really, really good. And when people talk about addiction, there is a feeling and a chemical reaction your brain gets when you are in flow and you are in maximum, curiosity, that is very akin to other sort of negative addictions. So if we want to get people to have a really kind of positive view and be highly engaged in terms of their life, we have to open up engagement corridors through curiosity in order to deliver that sense of satisfaction. And that's something that really gets to the heart of Zavmo AI. How do we liberate people from kind of status thinking, that doesn't lead to a fulfilled life. So what we want to do with Zavmo AI is really kind of unlock, by understanding who they are, what's important to them, and what they'd like to learn. We're able to, curate a learning conversation, be that through typing or verbal, audio conversation, but taking them in a specific direction. So unlike broad LLMs, what Zavmo is focused on is taking you on a journey. So, I know this about, Reiki. I want to know, I want to be an expert in Reiki. Right. What does the path look like? And can we schedule discussions that basically will allow me to go from somebody who doesn't know anything about the subject to, expert, or indeed pivot. So as I'm learning, I might want to, understand where Reiki came from. I might want to pivot into, massage or essential oils or whatever. And as I do this, I'm taken on if you like, a scaffolded educational journey, which will allow me to get better, and get a deeper insight of the subject, not just, information. So going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the forgetting curve, one of the things that, AI and LLMs do is they present you with a whole load of knowledge and then they forget what they've taught you, or they forget the discussion you've had. And that shouldn't be the case for a lifelong learning companion. With a lifelong learning companion, they recognize what your aspirations are and constantly bring you back, and forward in a way that allows you to, have a feeling of, succeeding and moving forward in, your life plan, so to speak.
So we're talking about using AI as a lifelong learning partner, coach, guide. So that would mean that somebody, to get the best use out of AI, would have to start using AI at a relatively early age.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the idea with Zavmo AI is there's one prompt, which is, what do you want to learn today? And then from that, Zavmo AI will ask you the questions. So you don't need to know anything about AI. You just need to open up the browser window, and it will say, if you've got your accessibility on, what would you like to learn today? And you start the conversation. So you don't need to learn anything about AI. The other thing about Zavmo AI is that we have ingested educational systems. So if you are, for example, looking to, do, exams or qualifications when you're 16 years old, or the right exams or qualifications for if you're looking to change career, the content that you will be taught will be benchmarked against industry standards. That doesn't mean to say you need to do a qualification. That just means that what you're being taught has got, roots in, accepted standards. So there's that quality assurance that you have when you're talking to Zavmo, that what you're being taught is something that would be taught in, the educational system.
Okay, so Zapmo could be something you use at a particular point in your life to just determine how you need to get to a new goal, but it could also be something that you start at a particular point in your life and continue to go along with it throughout your life. Is that correct?
That's the goal. So, it's also to keep you. So, for example, I want to be a yoga teacher. I genuinely do want to be a yoga teacher. And so I start my journey with Zavmo AI in the hope that at some point I will be a yoga teacher. But every time I go back to Zavmo AI, as well as understanding vector databases and influencing skills and, NLP and various other things that I'm trying to learn, I also have a stream going that is about getting my teacher training for yoga. And so, you are constantly reminded of, kind of the key goals that you have in your life and moving towards those goals. So, and you're taught in a structured way. So, you're taught, in a structured way. So from the basics all the way through to, in my case, being a teacher for yoga, as well as the other skills that I'm also trying to upskill myself in, which is, MongoDB, databases and things like that. So I can see my goals, and I can pursue them all. And hopefully through that gamified experience, I will be able to get to the end of them. And then, of course, I'll have a new set of goals. But at least I'm going to be reminded that, these are the things that I want to learn to stay curious.
Right. So if and when you are actually a yoga teacher, I'll introduce you to my friend Leanne Reiber, because she has a fitness app for people with disabilities and able-bodied people to exercise and stay healthy together. And she's continually trying to find trained, certified instructors, including yoga instructors, who understand how to speak and teach to people with disabilities. So, and one of the things she's been struggling with is finding accessible ways for people to become a fitness instructor. So I'm going to introduce her to your platform and see if maybe maybe Zapmo could help some of these people with disabilities navigate the process of becoming instructors.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, what's interesting about doing physical things on Zapmo is you can still have a conversation, but obviously Zapmo can not at the moment, but you will be able to turn your screen off on. So if you are doing a yoga pose or something like that, Zapmo can see what you're doing and can diagnose whether you're doing it correctly or not. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to do that for gas engineers. So basically what happens is you open up your camera lens on your mobile phone, and then Zapmo can see what you as a gas engineer are looking at and can mentor you through the diagnostics of that particular, boiler or whatever you as a gas engineer seem to be looking at. So that's another kind of use case. So although Zapmo is not a robot yet, it can diagnose or help, instruct in the physical world as well.
Yes, the question is can Zapmo be the accountability partner that encourages you strongly to actually do the work you need to be doing to accomplish your goal?
Well, I think one of the things that we know about learning is that in order for people to want to continue learning, it needs to be enjoyable. So one of the things that we programmed into Zapmo is that Zapmo should make you feel really supported and should reinforce that sense of you have succeeded. Now, that doesn't mean dumbing down the learning. That just means ensuring that the learner leaves the Zapmo experience every time with a very clear understanding of what they've achieved and, celebrated that. And so what you hope is that through instruction, good instruction that is highly personalized, you are creating enough curiosity so that person comes back. Because ultimately, as you so rightly said, development is, you need to, have a certain mental strength and a certain discipline in order to get something done. So we're trying to utilize every kind of neuroscience trick that we know, not trick, but hack that we know to engage people. And, one of those is reinforcement and praise, as well as, achieving, milestones in terms of, attainment. So all of these things we're trying to bring to bear on the Zapmo AI experience.
Right. And I'm totally comfortable with the word trick. I feel like it's an honest way of approaching this, because sometimes we do have to trick ourselves to get to do things that we want to do or know that we should be doing. But there are certain aspects of what we want to be doing that are not enjoyable. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And some things are hard. This is another thing.
Yes.
Like some people don't like hard things, but in order to do something extraordinary, often you do have to do hard things. And so, what we want people to do is really build up that kind of cognitive strength. So we call it cognitive load. So a lot of people that, use, let's say a lot of social media, our attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter. And in order to learn a new skill, you either need to repeat it very often, or you need to strengthen your cognitive load. And a lot of really complex ideas, you need to have a larger cognitive load, right? So the ability to be attentive over a longer period. And so what Zavmo AI does is it understands what your cognitive load is now and teaches you to grow that cognitive load through making sure that the instructional lessons that you're being given are interesting. And if they are interesting, you will be curious. And if you're curious, you will be able to expand your cognitive load. So, it's a beautiful cycle, the way the brain works. If you're happy, and if you're enjoying things, then basically you will do more of it. And through doing more of it, you will expand your cognitive load. And through expanding your cognitive load, you will be able to take on more information. And so the virtuous, beautiful circle continues.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking with Juliette Denning. And she is the founder of Iridescent Technology. She's been working in the field of learning for over 25 years. She's developed a product called Zapmo, which is an AI learning tool, a lifelong learning tool. And her goal is to create a system where education adapts to the user instead of making the user adapt to the system. You can find her at iridescenttechnology.ai. So as I'm listening to, your process there of how we learn, trying to make it enjoyable, I'm wondering if we can apply Zapmo to accessibility as a subject matter, because I've been toying with the idea of a book on accessibility, but approaching it from the point of view of storytelling, which is the way I have generally educated people about accessibility online, and trying to make it more enjoyable for them to grasp the basic concepts and some of the more, let's say, mid-level concepts of accessibility, as well as, helping them understand why they should care about accessibility. So is Zapmo, could it be something we could use to help more people learn about and use or embrace accessibility in their organizations if we approach it from Zapmo, making things fun?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And one of the things that I think is interesting, what you said, was this idea of story. So when you start, talking to Zavmo AI, one of the things that Zavmo asks you is, what kind of learning conversations do you like to have? So do you enjoy stories? Do you enjoy role play? Do you enjoy coaching? Do you enjoy Socratic dialogue? Do you enjoy, etc.? And so what you can do is pick the type of learning that you like. So for me, for example, I like practical case studies. So if somebody's going to teach me something new in and around, typically, my workplace, I really would like to have case studies that I can think through with my learning companion Zavmo in order to arrive at optimal situation. Other people like Socratic dialogue, so arguing from both sides of the story in order to really understand a concept. Other people like, telling it through story. Other people like it through coaching or mentoring or whatever it might be. So this is one of the things that Zavmo tries to understand about you in order to deliver the training in the way that makes most sense to you. But story is certainly one of the ones which is most utilized by, users of the Zavmo AI platform. And the answer to that is yes, of course. You can use Zavmo to learn anything if there are already established curricula and guidelines for teaching that. Because what we do is we ingest those guidelines to ensure that there isn't any hallucination. Zapmo doesn't hallucinate and start, teaching you things that, aren't approved by either at a national level or at an organizational level.
Okay, so in the field of accessibility, if I ask Zapmo to help me become knowledgeable on it, or possibly even help me become uh, so well informed on it that I could sit for one of the certifications, then it would go to the W3 website. It would go to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines sites. It would go to in the U.S. the Department of Justice 508. So it would go to the established standards in my country or at the international level, and that's where it would start as far as determining how to teach a particular subject. In this case, accessibility.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So what it does is it goes to the learning specifications. So the learning specifications are typically made up of three elements. One is the learning objectives, the next is the learning outcome, and the final one is the assessment criteria. So the first one is learning objectives. What do we hope you will learn by the time you've finished looking at this website or doing this course? Learning outcomes, this is what you will know. And this is, how you will know it, because you will be competent in the following things. And then assessment criteria is how we will test you. So what do you need to prove in order to know that you have actually reached, that full knowledge? So those are the three things that Zavmo AI looks for when it is delivering and taking the student through delivery and demonstrate. So Zavmo AI has four kind of major areas to the platform. The first one is discover. So discover what you want to learn, how you want to learn it, what your past experiences with learning and how you would like to, what optimizes your curiosity. Then discussion. So the discussion is how much time have you got? When would you like to learn? Typically, there'll be a training needs analysis in there. So you might know something about accessibility, but you want to go further. So what Zavmo will seek to do is understand what areas of accessibility are you comfortable with, and so seek to plug your gaps first before going on to, if you like, the PhD level of understanding accessibility. Then Zavmo will deliver in line with your hobbies, interests, the gap analysis that Zavmo's uncovered in the discuss phase. And then finally, you will go on to the demonstrate phase, where you will demonstrate how you are meeting the learning assessment. So what this means is that you can be sure of the quality of what you are learning. So it's done in the way that anyone would manage a curricula within an educational structure, be that if you are teaching 5-year-olds all the way through to postgrads.
Right. And so if we're talking about objectives or how you or the measuring the final goal, at least with accessibility, it would be one of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals certifications. So,
Yep.
and the reason I keep bringing this back to accessibility is not just for the podcast, but it's because a lot of people see accessibility as a subject that is totally foreign and other, something that they don't feel like they could ever wrap their minds around it as either a subject matter or as a profession. And that's the kind of thing that prevents people in organizations or prevents solo entrepreneurs from doing something that will actually help them in their business, their nonprofit, or their government agency. So that's why I have kept bringing it back to that particular subject, just in case people thought I was forcing my podcast on you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's lots of different areas that, we, as organizations and as individuals do need to do more. And I think one of the interesting things about accessibility is it should be tied in to some fundamental elements. So for example, if you're studying design or you're studying UI or you're studying, a myriad of different subjects, there's no reason why, within that curricula, you can't embed, things like accessibility as, a core. And in the area of, let's say, digital skills, there are lots of organizations that select to do that. So when we're looking at skills, we look at foundational skills, functional skills, and future skills. So foundational skills are things like listening, teamwork, those kind of things. Functional skills are things like, pursuing the law or medicine or whatever. And future skills are collaborative and digital skills, if you like, that are relevant to the future. So by adding in something like accessibility to foundational skills, automatically that will be cascaded to the whole organization at the right level. So, for me, anyone who's doing, a level 2, level 3, or level 4 qualification, so that would be anyone in the starting their career and up to kind of middle management, should be aware of accessibility. And so it should be within the foundational element of all training. So it's not like you would have it as a standalone subject, it would be embedded with everything. And I think that makes more sense in terms of trying to change organizational culture.
Oh, it definitely makes more sense, because quite often the issues around accessibility are caused by people who don't actually develop a website or app. They are generated by the UI, the user interface, user experience. They're created by the marketing design people, and then the poor coders have to come in after the fact and try to make what they've dreamed up accessible. So I like what you're talking about here, that Zapmo and a AI-based learning system would bring accessibility in as part of these other educational tracks for people who will have a variety of different jobs within the digital online space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what things like future skills allows companies to, if you like, curate what those future skills will be. So, if a large corporate is looking to roll out some training, and that could be new product training, it could be absolutely anything, a launch in a new country, they can include all sorts of things in there. So, accessibility, cultural training, DEI. So you're not actually training those specific things. What you're doing is raising awareness around those topics through delivering, new content in the area of, product, localization or whatever it might be, product, price, place, promotion, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And these are some of the things that should just be embedded in the core of everything. And of course, those are the things that you can do when you customize, Zapmo AI to your specific company, or your specific organization, or whatever it is.
Right. And you mentioned localization there, and we talked just before we started recording about localization, because yesterday I was speaking with Mike Paciello for a future episode of the podcast, and he's a leader in accessibility for over 40 years now. And he was talking about accessibility where the websites or the apps would recognize our adaptive technology and adjust to our abilities, as opposed to us having to adapt our technology to navigate a website or an app. And so when we're talking about AI and Zapmo in education, you're talking about localization, but on a different level, correct?
That's absolutely correct. So, Zavmo being a lifelong learning companion, you should not be doing the heavy lifting on understanding. Once you get started with Zavmo, it should be a frictionless partnership, whereby Zavmo understands the way you learn, what you're curious about, what your goals are, and will basically seamlessly fit into your life the time you want to speak to Zavmo, how you want to speak or type to Zavmo, where you want. So what we're assuming as well is that a lot of people will start using their mobile and will simply just kick off with having a conversation. So they might be coming back from work, they might be coming back from their shift, they might be, walking their dog, they might be, and what they'll be interested in is just pursuing that conversation about yoga, or about, accessibility, or about, the cultural revolution in China, or whatever it is that they are. And they will start that conversation at a time and a place, in a location, and in a way that basically suits them, rather than them having to do anything like, logging on, remembering their password, none of that. They will literally just be able to start a conversation.
Okay, so when I'm thinking about what you're talking about here, one of the things I have to ask, because I've run into this with ChatGPT and a couple of the, the straight generative AI options, is uh, how can we make the AI options like Zapmo more accessible to a user that has a disability, whether that's vision loss or somebody who's not neurotypical?
So on the neurotypical thing, we are spending a lot of time with that. So for example, I am dyslexic and my sons have got ADHD. Both of my sons work at Iridescent. In fact, our head of technology is my eldest son. And so when you have ADHD, so I can speak both to these things. When you have ADHD, one of the things is that you really, really struggle to focus, and then you hyper focus, right? So Zapmo AI needs to pick that up really quickly. So when you first start talking to Zapmo AI, Zapmo will ask if you are neurotypical, and so if you pick ADHD, Zapmo will be looking to move you around through multiple different curricula. But also, if you want to go through a deep dive, we'll know that you're not going to be doing a deep dive just to, let's say, complete level 2. You might want to go all the way to a level 5 or elements of a level 5, even though the qualification that you're pursuing or the level of is only level 2. If you're dyslexic like I am, the first thing is that predominantly you would probably want to talk to Zavmo. If you're not talking to Zavmo obviously needs to ignore spelling mistakes. Also, Zavmo needs to write in very short sentences, and Zavmo needs to double space things. Also, as a dyslexic, I have very short-term memory, so I need a lot of reinforcement. And because I have bad short-term memory, I also need a lot of positive affirmation. Now, those things are not the same as if you've got ADHD. So the way we are teaching, or Zavmo is teaching you, is very much reflective on what if you identify as someone with neurodiversity. Now, if you don't tell Zavmo that you have neurodiversity, Zavmo will be able to pick up along the way that you have some sort of neurodiversity, and will start changing and adapting to the way Zavmo is delivering out content, as Zavmo maps your interaction with, be it voice or with the interface, if you like, with Zavmo's interface. And this is particularly in and around cognition. So looking at how you're interacting with Zavmo and adapting based on your inputs and queries, if you like, when you are learning.
Okay, I've only got two more questions for you, and I'm trying to be respectful because I love doggies, and it sounds like yours wants your attention. So I've only got two more questions. One, I'm sure y'all have built in tools to protect people's safety and intellectual information, because people will have to trust the app in order to share the information so that it can do its job.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that again, in my book, Learning to Be Human, I'm really focused on this idea that we should not be using large language models. What we should be doing as a society is creating small language models. Okay, so those are, rather than try and boil the ocean and use a whole load of energy to basically use a large language model, we should be really specific and focused. And this is what we're driving towards at Zapmo AI, using a dedicated small language model that is specific to learning, right? And how the brain, works. So what we're interested in is creating a small language model that has much more neuroscience in the area of learning and a deeper understanding of cognition and engagement, And how that would work is that would work ideally at an open source level. So we would open source the code for that, and then that small language model could be used by educational institutions, organizations. But also within this model, there is very, very clear definitions as to what is personal information, what is organizational information, and what is kind of model information. And what we're saying is that anything that is already public knowledge, so this would be things like learning specifications, that would always be, with the small language model, i.e. Zabmo AI, which would be a version of a small language model. At an organizational level, you might want things that are specific to your organization. So that may be your mission, vision, values, etc., or your local authority way of doing things. And then at an individual level, that would be private to the individual, and it would never. So what you'd see aggregated data in terms of metacognition and things like that, but you wouldn't see anything which is personal to that individual. And so that sort of blueprint is written in the book, Learning to be Human. So I've called it the space framework. So it's about sovereignty, privacy, agency over your data, connection of that data in order to maximize the utility for you, and then finally equity. So how do we ensure equal access to tools like Zabmo AI for those people that are in any way disadvantaged versus those people that have the capacity, the full capacity to utilize a model like Zabmo AI.
Okay, and then in your bio, you mentioned that you've seen how creating an inclusive learning model benefits organizations. I would love it if you could share an experience or give some general examples of how this has happened, because I feel like the thing that the disability community does the worst is emphasizing the things that benefit people the most. And there are just so many positive benefits from being more inclusive. And I'd love for you to share some of your experiences.
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing that I know, from firsthand experience is that, but I've worked with a lot of neurodiverse people because I am very, very dyslexic. I struggle to read and write, but I do think that people that have got any form of disability, be that neuro or physical disability, have a lot to add in terms of the cusp of innovation. So what we know is that those people who are less typical basically deliver more innovation into the economy. And I think this is a story that we do not tell ourselves, right? We're obsessed by those people that are completely, have been successful at college, have basically done everything according to the book, are, in every way, shape and form meet sort of neurotypical norms. But the reality of innovation and new business is that it is by far and overwhelmingly driven by those people that are not not the norm, right? Where innovation happens is on the cusp of those people that are not typical. And I've seen that in my own organizations with people that have got physical disabilities. I've certainly seen that in my organization, people with neurotypical disabilities. And I think that is just the reality. Like, if you look at the stats, that's what you will see. By far and away, there are more entrepreneurs and more people kicking off new ways of thinking because they haven't been able to communicate, or they haven't been able to access things, and so they find new ways of doing it, and it makes them more determined, it makes them more innovative, and it makes them more entrepreneurial.
That is one of the things that I love explaining to business owners and talking about on my podcast or in public speaking, that because most of the time the world does not solve problems for us, we have to become creative problem solvers at an early age. We get good at it. We practice it. We put in our reps every day, because sometimes every day and more times sometimes multiple times within one day, we will have to come up with a solution, and it will be our personal solution based on where we're at and what tools we have available. And some of our solutions are not pretty, but they work. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think the other thing that I really do want to add here is that the brain is absolutely amazing. So if you have a disability, right,
yeah,
that means that one area of your brain, in my case, right, I'm dyslexic, my short-term memory is not as good as other people that are, neurotypical, right?
right,
But that means that my brain has basically utilized other areas of my brain, and they are much, much better than those people who are neurotypical. And this is where the innovation stems from. This idea that because you are, on the spectrum, or because you have a disability, you are a superhuman in other areas. And we can see this in so many areas. Those people that maybe have, visual impairments might have incredible sense of hearing or spatial awareness. And this is what really excites me about the human brain versus AI. So AI has a very linear probabilistic way of thinking, whereas humans have a kind of cornucopia, a different way of viewing, different elements through the five senses that they have. And so I think when we look at disabilities, what we need to see is both disability but also superhuman elements that are the brain naturally morphs into. So where you can be, looked at as somebody who can't do things, I think what we should be looking at is all the amazing ways and the strength that those people have done workarounds, because it's incredible what the brain can do.
right. This whole new field of neuroelasticity is very encouraging, and it's one of those things I'm curious about, but not curious enough about to become the expert in. But the whole idea that the brain can redirect its ability to process information based on abilities, disabilities, injury, trauma, age, whatever.
Yep.
And, one of the things I've learned about it is that because the brain is built to spend so much of its energy processing visual cues, that when it no longer has to process those visual cues, it has a lot of computing power to use on other things. And those are not all cognitive or not all thought. I feel like, and I may get in trouble if anybody listens this long into the podcast, but I think that the loss of the vision in some people can also allow the brain to spend more time on the emotional aspects of understanding others and empathy and those sorts of things.
I think that's absolutely entirely right. I mean, the mind shifts, but what we do know is the energy in the mind is still the same. So the power of the mind, and also the other thing is the more you think about things, whether you've got access to certain senses or whatever, that energy will just be focused on the areas that you do have. And I think we need to encourage this thinking. We need to encourage the idea that just because you don't have a skill in one area doesn't mean to say you can't be an absolute superhero in another. And I certainly, going back to having neurodiversity and having diversity in your workplace, I think this is why, because you get people with incredible empathy, incredible kind of ability to find workarounds, incredible if you employ people and if you work with teams that are diverse.
Well, that's a great place to end. Juliette, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm looking forward to hearing more about iridescent technology.ai and your book. Definitely hope to get to read it and share it with people when it comes out. And I really do think that you are in the vanguard, so to speak, of a lot of things, including accessibility, because as I mentioned, I interviewed somebody yesterday who basically said that this localization, having things that adjust to us instead of us adjusting to them, is the future through AI. And it sounds like that's where you've you've been. So I appreciate you doing the work you do and for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Max. It's an absolute pleasure to speak with you. So thank you very much for inviting me. And yeah, very much enjoyed it. I'll send you a copy of the book when it comes out. I'll send you an audio of the book when it comes out.
I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that you've enjoyed your time with me. So let me do my closing, and then I will let you get on to the rest of your evening. So, yeah, it's been really good having Juliette on the podcast. I do hope y'all will check out her website and explore more about Zapmo. As you know, I am the blind blogger, Maxwell Ivy. This is the Accessibility Advantage podcast at accessibilityadvantage.com. I've been educating people about accessibility for almost 2 decades now, and I regularly write, speak, and consult on the subject, as well as hosting this podcast and appearing on other podcasts on accessibility and inclusion. So I do hope you will reach out to me. There's a link on the homepage where you can schedule a short chat. We can get to know each other and discuss your needs, because the truth is the disability community and the many people who have challenges, who don't consider themselves disabled, but still live with things like vision loss, hearing loss, cognitive developmental issues, they need you to be inclusive. So I hope you will check out the accessibilityadvantage.com. So thank y'all for joining me. I look forward to having y'all again with me next time. Please do take care of yourselves out there. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those dollar signs, 'cause accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities.
Item chooser menu 107 1 item end stream button end stream button end of stream and ultra set not end stream end stream.